I worked long and hard to provide for us. We had a perfect life, or so I thought. Sarah and I were building our dream in that beautiful downtown apartment. Things slowly changed. Her late nights, password-protected phone, and distant behavior. I never expected what I'd find that night when her phone lit up with those messages. But nothing prepared me for that moment in court when she smirked at me across the room, thinking she had stolen our home from under me with a forged document. Let me know where you're watching from, hit subscribe, and I'll tell you how I fought back when I lost everything. 6 years ago, I met Sarah at my college roommate's wedding. I was 35, established in my career as a software engineer, and ready to settle down. Sarah caught my attention immediately, smart, ambitious, with an infectious laugh that drew everyone toward her. We connected over our shared love of travel and technology. By the end of the night, I had her number, and within a week, we were on our first date. Our relationship moved quickly. After 18 months of dating, I proposed during a trip to Hawaii. The sunset, the ring, her tears of joy. Everything seemed perfect. We married in a small ceremony with close friends and family, and immediately began planning our future. 2 years into our marriage, we found our dream apartment in downtown Seattle. It was a beautiful 3-bedroom unit with floor-to-ceiling windows, overlooking the city skyline. The price was steep, but with my savings, and both our incomes, we could manage it. I contributed 80% of the down payment from money I had saved for years before meeting Sarah. She added the remaining 20%, and we were both named on the deed. At least that was what I believed at the time. The first 3 years of marriage were everything I had hoped for. We traveled to Japan, Italy, and Brazil. We hosted dinner parties for our friends. We talked about having children soon. Sarah worked as an administrator at a legal office, while I continued advancing in my career at a major tech company. Our finances were comfortable, and we seemed to want the same things out of life. The first signs of trouble were subtle. Sarah started keeping her phone face down and changed her password. She had always been open with her devices before. When I mentioned it casually, she said her office had implemented new security protocols. It seemed reasonable enough. Then came the late nights. Sarah began staying out after work more frequently, citing team events or drinks with colleagues. She joined a new social circle at work that she rarely invited me to meet. There was one name that started coming up frequently: Jason, from the marketing department. Sarah described him as a work friend who was helping her network for a potential promotion. Our physical intimacy decreased. Sarah was often too tired or not in the mood. I noticed her buying new clothes, changing her hairstyle, wearing more makeup. None of these things were concerning on their own, but together they created a knot of worry in my stomach. When I tried to discuss these changes, Sarah would deflect my concerns. "You are being paranoid, Kobe," she would say with an exasperated sigh. Or, "It is just work stress. Not everything is about you." She made me feel selfish for even bringing up my concerns. I began to doubt myself, wondering if I was just being insecure. One evening, we were supposed to have a date night at home. I had cooked her favorite meal and bought a nice bottle of wine. 10 minutes before dinner was ready, Sarah texted that she needed to stay late at work to finish an urgent project. I ate alone. The romantic evening I had planned wasted. When she finally came home around 11, her cheeks were flushed and she smelled like alcohol, not like someone who had been working. Still, I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe in us. I told myself that marriages have rough patches, and we would get through this one. I had no idea how deep the deception went, or how carefully Sarah was already planning her exit strategy. The night I discovered Sarah's affair began like any other Tuesday. I was working from home while Sarah attended what she called a department strategy meeting. She texted that she would be late. Around 9 in the evening, she finally came home looking slightly disheveled but in a good mood. She headed straight for the shower. While Sarah was in the bathroom, her phone lit up on the kitchen counter. Normally, I would never check her messages, but the notification preview caught my eye. It was from Jason from marketing, and what I could see read: "Tonight was amazing. I still taste you on." My heart pounding, I picked up her phone. To my surprise, it was unlocked. Sarah had apparently been too distracted to engage the screen lock. With shaking hands, I opened the message thread. What I saw destroyed me. Hundreds of messages between Sarah and Jason going back at least 5 months. Explicit photos. Detailed accounts of their encounters at various hotels. Plans for future meetings. Even worse were the messages discussing me. "Poor Kobe has no idea," Sarah had written. He is so trusting, it is almost sad. His loss is my gain, Jason replied. When are you going to tell him? Not until everything is ready, was her response. Patience. I scrolled through their conversation history, each message a fresh knife in my heart. They had been meeting 2 or 3 times a week, sometimes during lunch breaks, other times when Sarah told me she was working late. There were photos of them together in places I recognized, restaurants where Sarah and I had celebrated anniversaries, a hotel where we had stayed for my birthday weekend. When Sarah emerged from the shower, I was sitting at the kitchen table, her phone in front of me. Her face went through a rapid series of expressions, surprise, anger, then a cold calculation that I had never seen before. You went through my phone, she demanded, as if I were the one who had done something wrong. Are you sleeping with Jason? I asked, my voice barely working. You had no right to invade my privacy, she continued, avoiding the question. I pushed the phone toward her, the messages visible on the screen. How long has this been going on? She stared at me for a long moment, then seemed to decide that denial was pointless. A few months, she admitted with a shrug that felt like another betrayal. No remorse, no apology. Why, I asked, hating how broken I sounded. You are always working, Kobe. Always focused on your next project, your next promotion. Jason makes me feel alive. He pays attention to me. I was stunned. I had always believed I was working hard for our future, for the life we were building together. I had never once suspected she felt neglected. We can fix this, I said desperately. We can go to counseling. I can cut back at work. Sarah laughed, a cold sound I had never heard from her before. It is too late for that. This thing with Jason, it is real. What you and I have has been over for a long time. That night I moved into the spare bedroom. The next few weeks were a blur of pain and confusion. I suggested marriage counseling, and to my surprise, Sarah agreed. But during our 3 sessions, she was distant and uncooperative, checking her watch frequently and giving minimal responses to the therapist's questions. It became clear she was only going through the motions. At home, Sarah became increasingly cruel. She would take phone calls from Jason while I was in the next room laughing loudly at his jokes. She started staying out overnight, not bothering to make excuses anymore. When she was home, she treated me like an unwanted roommate, barely acknowledging my presence. My work suffered. I lost focus in meetings, missed deadlines, and snapped at colleagues. My boss called me in for a conversation about my performance, which had never happened before in my career. I confided in my best friend David, who provided a couch to crash on when staying in the apartment with Sarah became unbearable. The final straw came 2 months after discovering the affair. I came home early from work with a migraine and overheard Sarah on the phone in our bedroom. I cannot wait to have you over to my apartment, she was saying to Jason. Once Kobe is gone, we can redecorate however we want. My lawyer says it will all be over soon. My apartment. Our prenuptial agreement clearly stated that in case of divorce, assets acquired during the marriage would be divided based on contribution. Since I had put in 80% of the down payment and made most of the mortgage payments, the apartment should largely remain mine. 2 days later, Sarah informed me that she had filed for divorce. She seemed oddly confident, almost gleeful. I was devastated but also confused by her certainty. What did she know that I did not? After Sarah filed for divorce, I hired Jackson Williams, an attorney recommended by David. Jackson had 20 years of experience in family law and a reputation for being thorough. During our first meeting, I brought our prenuptial agreement, financial records, and documentation about the apartment purchase. Based on these documents and your prenup, you should be in a fairly strong position regarding the apartment, Jackson said, after reviewing everything. Your contribution is clearly documented, and the prenup is solid. His confidence gave me the first glimmer of hope since discovering the affair. Maybe this nightmare would end with some measure of justice. Then came the discovery phase of our divorce proceedings. Jackson requested all documentation related to the apartment from Sarah's attorney. What came back changed everything. Kobe, we have a serious problem, Jackson said during an emergency meeting. He placed a document on his desk and turned it toward me. This is a deed transfer for your apartment dated 3 months ago. It shows you transferring your interest in the property entirely to Sarah. I stared at the paper, uncomprehending. That is impossible. I never signed anything like this. Jackson pointed to a signature at the bottom. It looked like mine, but I had no recollection of ever signing such a document. The transfer appears to be properly notarized, Jackson continued. If this document is legitimate, Sarah now owns the apartment outright. It is a forgery. I said, my voice rising. I never signed this. I would never give away my home. As we investigated further, the picture became clearer and more disturbing. Sarah had worked at a notary office before her current job. She still had friends there. The deed transfer was dated during a week when I had been on a business trip to San Francisco. She had forged my signature and used her connections to make it appear legitimate. She had also manipulated our joint account access during the same period, temporarily redirecting notifications, so I would not see any unusual activity. The county records office had processed the transfer without question since all the paperwork appeared in order. Sarah had planned everything, meticulously timing it perfectly when I would be out of town and unable to discover what she had done. Our first court appearance was scheduled for a preliminary hearing regarding asset division. I arrived feeling nervous but believed the truth would prevail. Jackson had prepared a motion to invalidate the fraudulent deed transfer. When Sarah entered the courtroom, I barely recognized her. Gone was the casual style she had favored during our marriage. She wore an expensive suit and was accompanied by an attorney from one of Seattle's most prestigious law firms. How she could afford him on her salary, I could not imagine. Then I remembered Jason mentioning in one of their messages that his father was a senior partner at a major firm. As the hearing began, Sarah's attorney presented the deed transfer to the judge. Your Honor, as this document clearly shows Mr. Bryant voluntarily transferred his interest in the property to Mrs. Bryant 3 months ago. The transfer was properly executed and notarized. The apartment belongs solely to my client. The judge examined the document carefully. Mr. Williams, did your client sign this deed transfer? Jackson stood. Your Honor, my client categorically denies signing this document. We believe the signature was forged while Mr. Bryant was out of town on business. That is a serious allegation, the judge responded. Do you have evidence to support this claim of forgery? We are gathering evidence, Your Honor, but the timing of the transfer during Mr. Bryant's business trip is highly suspicious, as is the fact that Mr. Bryant received no notification of such a significant property transfer. The judge frowned. Mrs. Bryant's documentation appears to be in order, including a notary seal. Without concrete evidence of forgery, I am inclined to consider this a valid transfer. However, I will give you 2 weeks to present evidence supporting your claim before making a determination. As the judge spoke, I glanced across the courtroom at Sarah. She was looking directly at me, a small smirk playing at the corner of her lips. In that moment, I saw the truth of who she really was. Calculating, manipulative, completely without remorse. This had never been about falling out of love or even her affair with Jason. This had been about taking what was mine, what I had worked for years to build. That smirk broke something inside me. I had been mourning the loss of the woman I loved, but that woman had never existed. The real Sarah was sitting across from me, gloating over her apparent victory. After court, I broke down in my car. Everything I had worked for was slipping away. My marriage was over. My home might be lost. My career was suffering. I called David, barely able to speak through my tears. She planned this whole thing, I finally managed to say. She's going to take everything. Not if we can prove what she did, David replied firmly. Kobe, listen to me. She made a mistake somewhere. People like Sarah always do. We just need to find it. Later that day, I met with Jackson again to strategize our next move. As he reviewed the deed transfer once more, he noticed something. The notary stamp, he said suddenly. It has an expiration date of June 2023, but the notary whose name is on it, Melissa Jordan, had her commission renewed in January. Her current stamp should show an expiration date of January 2026. It was a small detail, but it was our first real lead. The document had been notarized with an outdated stamp, possibly a duplicate or stolen one. It was not much, but it gave us a starting point. Over the next 2 weeks, David and I became amateur detectives working alongside Jackson to uncover evidence of Sarah's fraud. I took time off work using vacation days. I had been saving for what was supposed to be our 5th anniversary trip. Every waking hour was dedicated to proving what Sarah had done. First, we tracked down all the original mortgage paperwork and purchase documents for the apartment. I found bank statements showing the initial deposit coming from my personal account before our marriage. We discovered that Sarah had actually been in significant credit card debt when we met, something she had never disclosed, and would not have qualified for the mortgage on her own. I compiled detailed records of every mortgage payment made from our joint account, showing that the majority of deposits into that account came from my salary. We created a comprehensive financial timeline that clearly demonstrated my 80% contribution to the property. David suggested we check with the building's security team. Many upscale apartment buildings in downtown Seattle had surveillance systems covering the entrances and elevators. If Sarah had brought someone to the apartment to falsely notarize documents during my business trip, there might be footage. The security manager was reluctant to help without a court order, but when I explained the situation and showed him my name on the original deed, he agreed to review the footage from the dates in question. He could not give us copies without legal authorization, but confirmed that he saw Sarah entering the building with a woman who was not a regular resident during the afternoon. I was supposedly signing over my property while actually 800 miles away in San Francisco. The breakthrough came when Jackson subpoenaed my travel records and corporate expense reports. They definitively proved I was in San Francisco, attending a tech conference, when the deed transfer was supposedly signed and notarized in Seattle. I had used my company credit card throughout the trip and had attended recorded sessions at the conference. There was no way I could have been in two places at once. We also located the real Melissa Jordan, the notary whose stamp appeared on the document. When shown the deed transfer, she confirmed that it was not her signature and that her notary journal had no record of such a transaction. More importantly, she revealed that her notary stamp had been stolen from her office about 6 months earlier. She had reported it and obtained a new one with the updated expiration date. Through careful examination of our joint bank records, we found evidence of unusual activity during the period of the alleged transfer. Sarah had temporarily changed the notification settings on our online banking, then changed them back after the deed was processed. She had also made a cash withdrawal of $5,000 the day before the transfer, money that might have been used to pay whoever helped her with the fraud. Perhaps the most damning evidence came from Sarah's own email. Jackson had requested access to her accounts as part of the standard discovery process. Initially, she had claimed to have deleted all relevant emails about the apartment, but our tech team was able to recover deleted messages from her work computer, which had been backed up to her company's server. There we found correspondence between Sarah and a friend at the county records office asking about hypothetical procedures for property transfers and how thoroughly signatures were verified. There were also emails with a former colleague from the notary office with vague references to needing a special favor and being willing to make it worth her while. While investigating Sarah's affair, I also discovered that Jason from marketing was actually Jason Westfield Jr., son of Jason Westfield Sr., founding partner of Westfield and Associates, 2S, one of Seattle's most prestigious law firms, and the very firm representing Sarah in our divorce. This explained how she could afford such expensive legal representation. I wondered if Jason Sr. knew his son was involved with a married woman who was committing fraud. With David's encouragement, I made the difficult decision to contact Jason's wife, Amanda. I had found references to her in some of the text messages between Sarah and Jason. Amanda was initially hostile, believing I was trying to cause trouble, but when I showed her some of the messages between our spouses, her anger redirected. She agreed to provide a statement confirming that Sarah and Jason had been seen together on multiple occasions during times when Sarah had told me she was working late. By the time our second court date arrived, we had built an ironclad case proving Sarah's fraud. Jackson organized all the evidence, methodically creating a clear narrative of Sarah's deception. The morning of our second court appearance, I felt a mix of anxiety and determination. The past 2 weeks had been exhausting, but we had gathered substantial evidence of Sarah's fraud. This would be our chance to set things right. When we entered the courtroom, Sarah and her attorney were already there. She looked confident, as ever dressed in another expensive outfit, whispering to her lawyer. She barely glanced at me. I wondered if she knew what was coming, or if she still believed her plan was foolproof. The judge called the session to order. I understand the parties have additional evidence regarding the disputed deed transfer. Mr. Williams, you may proceed. Jackson rose from his seat with the calm assurance of someone holding a winning hand. Your Honor, we have conclusive evidence that the deed transfer purportedly signed by my client is fraudulent. With the court's permission, I would like to present this evidence. Proceed, the judge said. Over the next hour, Jackson methodically laid out our case. He started with my travel records and expense reports, proving I was in San Francisco when the document was allegedly signed in Seattle. As you can see, Your Honor, my client attended a keynote address at the Pacific Technology Conference at exactly 2:15 p.m. on March 12th. Here is the conference badge scan record and a photograph from the event showing Mr. Bryant in attendance. The deed transfer was notarized in Seattle at 2:30 p.m. on the same day. It is physically impossible for him to have been in both places. Sarah's attorney interjected, "Perhaps Mr. Bryant signed the document before his trip and it was notarized later." "That brings me to our second piece of evidence," Jackson continued smoothly. He called Melissa Jordan the notary whose stamp appeared on the document. Melissa testified that the stamp used was stolen months earlier, that the signature on the notary line was not hers, and that her notary journal had no record of such a transaction. Furthermore, she added, proper notarization requires the signer to appear in person with valid identification. I would never notarize a document without the signer present. Next came the financial evidence. Jackson presented bank records showing my significant contribution to the apartment purchase. The unusual account setting changes made by Sarah during the period in question, and the large cash withdrawal just before the fraudulent transfer. Your Honor, we have also recovered deleted emails from Mrs. Bryant's work computer, Jackson said, introducing the correspondence between Sarah and her contacts at the county records office and notary service. As the evidence mounted, I watched Sarah's composure begin to crack. The smirk was gone, replaced by a tightening around her eyes and mouth. Her attorney was frantically writing notes and whispering to her. Then came the surprise witness. Your Honor, we call Amanda Westfield to the stand. Sarah's head snapped up at the name. A well-dressed woman entered the courtroom, Jason's wife. On the stand, Amanda testified about discovering her husband's affair with Sarah and finding messages discussing their plans to move into Sarah's apartment after the divorce was finalized. They specifically mentioned how Sarah had taken care of the deed and that Kobe would never know what hit him, Amanda stated coldly, staring directly at Sarah. Sarah's attorney stood up. Your Honor, this testimony about an alleged affair is irrelevant to the property dispute and appears designed solely to embarrass my client. The judge disagreed. The testimony goes to motive and prior planning, which are relevant to the fraud allegation. I will allow it. By the time Jackson finished presenting our case, the atmosphere in the courtroom had completely shifted. The judge was looking at Sarah with undisguised disapproval. Sarah's attorney requested a brief recess, which was granted. When court resumed 15 minutes later, Sarah's attorney had changed tactics. Your Honor, in light of the new evidence, my client would like to request a continuance to properly address these allegations. The judge was not receptive. I have seen more than enough evidence to make a determination in this matter. The deed transfer document is clearly fraudulent, the result of deliberate deception by Mrs. Bryant. I am nullifying the transfer effective immediately. She continued, her voice stern. Furthermore, given the extensive evidence of fraud, including document forgery and perjury, I am awarding the apartment entirely to Mr. Bryant. Mrs. Bryant's actions constitute an egregious breach of good faith in these proceedings. The judge then addressed Sarah directly. Mrs. Bryant, I should note that forgery and fraudulent transfer of property are criminal offenses. Mr. Bryant would be well within his rights to pursue criminal charges. Consider yourself fortunate if he chooses not to do so. Finally, the judge granted our motion for an expedited divorce with terms largely favorable to me. The nightmare was nearly over. As we prepared to leave the courtroom, Sarah approached me, tears in her eyes, the first emotion I had seen from her in months. Kobe, please, can we talk? This has all gotten out of hand. I looked at her, this woman I had once loved enough to marry, now revealed as a stranger capable of calculated betrayal. There is nothing left to say, I replied quietly. The divorce will be final in 30 days. Until then, communicate through our attorneys. I walked away, leaving her standing there. For the first time since discovering her affair, I felt the weight beginning to lift from my shoulders. The apartment was mine. The truth had prevailed. I could begin to rebuild my life. Winning in court should have felt like a complete victory, but when I returned to the apartment that evening, the emptiness hit me hard. Sarah had moved out most of her belongings during our legal battle. The spaces where her things had been, her books on the shelves, her paintings on the walls, her plants by the windows, were conspicuously vacant. I had won back my home, but it no longer felt like one. The first few weeks were the hardest. I would come home from work to silence. No one to share meals with, no one to discuss the day with. Even though the final months with Sarah had been painful, at least there had been another presence in the space. Now there was only absence. David suggested I redecorate, make the place truly mine again. I started small, rearranging furniture, buying new bedding, replacing the dining table where Sarah and I had shared so many meals. Each change helped reclaim the space. I painted the walls a different color, hung new artwork, bought plants that I chose myself. Healing emotionally took longer than renovating the apartment. At David's suggestion, I started seeing a therapist who specialized in betrayal trauma. Dr. Lena Morris helped me understand that what I had experienced was not just the end of a marriage but a profound breach of trust that affected how I saw myself and others. Recovery is not linear, she would remind me in our sessions. Some days will be better than others. The goal is not to forget what happened, but to integrate it into your life story without letting it define you. In therapy, I explored difficult questions. How had I missed the signs of Sarah's deception? Could I have done anything differently? How could I ever trust anyone again? Gradually, I came to recognize that while there might have been warning signs, Sarah's behavior was not a reflection of my worth or judgment. Some people are skilled at hiding their true nature. I reconnected with friends I had neglected during my marriage. My college roommate Tom and I resumed our tradition of monthly hiking trips. I joined a local programming club where I met other tech professionals who shared my interests. My sister Jennifer visited from Boston for 2 weeks, filling the apartment with laughter and new memories. Work became a source of strength rather than stress. I threw myself into new projects, earning recognition and eventually a promotion. My boss, who had been understanding during the worst of the divorce proceedings, commented on my renewed focus and creativity. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I received an unexpected email from Amanda Westfield, Jason's wife. She wanted to meet for coffee. Curious, I agreed. "I wanted to thank you in person," Amanda said, when we met at a small cafe downtown. "Your evidence about Jason and Sarah gave me the push I needed to leave a marriage that had been unhealthy for years." She explained that she had filed for divorce herself and was rebuilding her life as a single mother to their 2 children. "How did things end with Jason and Sarah?" I asked, realizing I had not kept track of their relationship after the court case. Amanda laughed without humor. "Jason ended things with Sarah immediately after the court hearing. His father was furious about the whole situation, not because of the affair, mind you, but because it made the firm look bad to be associated with attempted fraud. Last I heard, Sarah had to leave her job because of her damaged reputation. She moved to Portland or somewhere." This information did not bring me the satisfaction I might have expected earlier in the process. Instead, I felt a quiet compassion for Sarah. Her life had unraveled because of her own choices, but I took no pleasure in her downfall. As the 1-year anniversary of discovering Sarah's affair approached, I found myself thinking about it less often. The apartment had become truly mine, filled with new memories and associations. The pain had faded to a dull ache that only occasionally flared up. Around this time, I met Amelia at a charity event for a local education initiative. She was a kindergarten teacher with a quick wit and genuine warmth that drew me in immediately. After 2 coffee meetings that stretched into hours of conversation, I asked her on a proper date. We took things slowly, both of us cautious for different reasons. I was transparent with Amelia about my divorce and the betrayal I had experienced. She appreciated my honesty and shared her own past relationship challenges. We established clear communication patterns from the beginning, checking in regularly about our feelings and expectations. The experience with Sarah had taught me valuable lessons that, painful as they were, made me a better partner and person. I learned the importance of maintaining independence even within a relationship. I became meticulous about documenting important financial matters. I developed a stronger trust in my intuition. That uncomfortable feeling I had ignored with Sarah would not be dismissed so easily again. Perhaps most importantly, I discovered my own resilience. The betrayal that once felt like it would destroy me had instead revealed strengths I did not know I possessed. I had fought for justice and won. I had rebuilt my home and my life. I had opened myself to new relationships, despite the risk of being hurt again. Forgiveness came gradually, not as a gift to Sarah but as a release for myself. Holding on to anger and resentment only kept me tethered to the past. Letting go did not mean excusing what Sarah had done or forgetting the lessons learned. It meant refusing to allow her actions to control my future happiness. 2 years after the divorce, my life had transformed completely. The apartment that had nearly been stolen from me had become a true sanctuary. My relationship with Amelia continued to grow in mutual respect and honest communication. My career flourished, and my friendships deepened. Sarah's betrayal had once seemed like the end of everything I valued. Instead, it became the catalyst for building a life with a stronger foundation, one based on authenticity, healthy boundaries, and genuine connection. The experience taught me that while we cannot control the actions of others, we always have a choice in how we respond and rebuild. I share this story not to dwell on the pain of betrayal, but to offer hope to anyone facing similar challenges. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after a betrayal or significant loss? How did you find your way forward? Your experience might help others who are still in the midst of their struggle. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more journeys of resilience. And remember, sometimes what feels like an ending is actually the beginning of a better, more authentic chapter of your life. Thank you for listening, and I wish you strength and healing on your own journey.